everyone, Karen the Warp Spinster here. Welcome to my channel and thank you for joining me today. This is what we worked on last week, the party in Dresden. Just doing some different things and improv things with the Dresden Plate design. And I still haven't appliqued this circle on because I'm not quite sure yet where I want to put that. But it will be put on there, and I really like this as is, I think. So this particular piece I don't think is going anyplace different. But today I want to explore some other possibilities. It's kind of the standard sorts of things we do. One is to splice in something across here at a diagonal, probably in opposition to whatever angle is up here. And I probably am, of course, going to use a black and white stripe for that. I've been using black and white with pops of color in it, but this time I think I'm going to do the color with pops of black and white. So we'll do that, and then I also want to try something else that we'll get into later. My main focus today is trying to figure out structurally how to do it, the order for things. I want to, if you remember, we learned that it probably would be better if I use a fusible web underneath it to kind of control the little roots. And I could cut the threads too, couldn't I? That the raveled edges that I had to contain, and it turned out okay. And in some respects it's all right because I don't have extra bulk. I still have the stabilizer on the back, which I will remove now that I've decided this is how it's going to stay. But I want to see how I might do that this week without having extra bulk everywhere. So just on edges, or however I can arrange it to reduce the bulk from using the fusible web. So if you are not into process and figuring things out and hearing me talk out loud, I know that's exactly why some people are here, and some people it's not your thing, so this is the time to bail. If this is not your thing, or you can, fast forward to the end and see how things turned out. So let's get started with just doing some insertions in the blades. Move that out of the way, and I have some strips here left over from my, let me think of the name of the quilt. I have to think of that for a minute. It's one I just finished. It is on the machine, and I am getting ready to ship my long arm back to the manufacturer for the motor. I've gotten the answer to my questions. I've got the box. So this afternoon, that is going to be my job, is to box that baby up. Pipe dreams, that's it. I knew if I chatted long enough, I would be able to figure it. Mostly I had to look over and see, oh yes, that's what it looks like. So I have some strips here of a black and white stripe. I have other black and white stripes, and I will probably grab one sometime when I'm not on camera and be ready to put that in. Now I am going to insert this before I cut the wedge shape and before I put the fusible web on, which I know seems a little weird. Let me think about that. No, because, all right, here's my thinking. If I cut the wedge first, then I can really minimize the amount of fusible web that I have on the edge. However, because I can predict where those lines are going to be because I've already cut them. If I put fusible web on beforehand, then I don't know where my cuts are going to be, and I will have to do the whole thing in fusible web, which gives me all that bulk there. I could put 2 strips along the side here and just hope that the wedge is going to get covered. I'm using Steamicine 2 So I might potentially be able to cut it first. Remove the paper on one side, cut it first. Now I think I'm better off to do the edges first. Still be able to cut down a little bit of bulk from the inside, and then cut the strip. So I'm going to try that on this one. And I'm not, well, let me think. I could also, if I'm going to do it, cut it this way, then I could of course arrange this. So here's the edge of that. I could arrange this so that it's sort of in a wedge shape to begin with. And I'm going to lose some here, but them's the breaks in this game. So I will do that first, and then I will come back. This has the double paper, and it also is sticky. This is Steam 2, so I can put it down and then put this paper back, then cut it, and then fuse it. Which means that I could do the edge. The other thing that I could do is to cut it maybe just a little bit bigger than I think I'm going to, put this right at the edge, and then do a final trim. That might be the best thing, because then I could get just the very edge that I want, not be using a lot of this, not wasting a lot of this. Okay, so because I'm using Steam 2, I think I can do that. We'll give it a try anyway. So I'm going to, first of all, and I want to make sure that I'm also covering the top portion here when I do that. And I want to do this at, say, that angle, which that goes into my crumb sack. And now I'm going to cut my wedge shape. Another thing I want to try with this is to have the ends down here uneven. You might have seen that in my sketchbook when I was sketching this out. I didn't do that on the other one. On this one we did last week, I sort of evened that up into a curve, which almost worked right. But I think I just want to have those ends uneven on these. Oops. And let's make this one pretty wedgy. And let me start up here to make sure I've got enough there. Okay. And I'm not trying to make these a particular angle or have it be nicely symmetrical or anything. It's just an improv wedge shape. All right, now I anticipate that's going to be a little bit narrower after I do the fusible web. So now I want to be able to see the edge that I'm doing, and the trick for me actually is going to be making sure that I get the fusible web on the proper side instead of doing one on the right side and one on the wrong side. It would be much easier, of course, if oops. Come on, you can stick. Can put that paper over the top, and now I'm going to press just along here. And I'm trying not to press too much here and activate that unnecessarily, activate that adhesive. So now when I cut this, I'm going to cut it with just a very little bit of margin there because that's all I need to control that raveling on the edge. That paper is going to come up. Finish the cut here, and I'll have to add a little on the top there too. Now, if I'm overlapping, that was a bad cut, I will clean that up. If I'm overlapping these blades, then I really only need to do this on the top blade because, of course, the other edge will be underneath. So now I have a nice little controlled edge there. Got a little bit here that I will trim off before I get the next section going. It's less waste than I would have had the other way, I think. All right, now I need to, if I can peel the paper back here, I have been losing my thumbnail daily because it cracked way back, and I'm trying to pull it back so that it does not. All right, now I have to make sure that the adhesive side is going to be, sorry about the paper rattling, is going to be on, nope, got to think about that. There we go. I'll get it eventually. This is why I have to remind myself ahead of time to check these things, because it is entirely possible, if not likely, that I will put it on the wrong side. All right. So here we go. And then press that to fuse it. Trim it. And I can trim it as close or as far as I want, but I do want to make sure that the edge is covered by the Fusible. All right, now I need the top edge there. Paper comes off the other side so that I've got it nice and clean here. And then, actually I guess I should do both top and bottom, so I'll do that and come back. You don't have to watch me do that. So you have probably all been yelling at me, but here's another option. I could just cut a narrow strip of this, lay it on the edges, and trim after that. I'm going to try that with the top and the bottom here. Much easier than flinging around that larger piece. So that's just what I'm going to do here, is apply it there. And this is, oh, I just have a little spot here to do yet, but that's ready to go. Now, another reason to do it, cutting the strips ahead of time, is if you do, when you're pressing part of it here using the full sheet, where your iron moves into the area that you're not applying to the fabric at that moment, it activates the adhesive and it can do funky things. Even though it's not going to stick to itself because of the paper, it does gnarly things to the strip. So this is going to be the better way to do it. It is more time consuming, and if you are making something that you don't care that you have a lot of bulk under there, then that would certainly be the quicker way, is to just put the whole thing on Fusible web and take it from there. All right, so I've just got a little bit up here to do, and I found with the strip it's actually just easier to put that on first and then come back and put the paper strip back here, making sure it's covering all of the adhesive part so that my iron isn't going to get adhesive. Right. So now we have a Dresden blade that will have clean, sharp edges when I fuse it down to the background. It's more fiddly to do it with the narrow strips, but you have less bulk. Now to insert something here, and I want it to be in opposition to that. Do I want one or do I want two? Now, of course, I'm going to have these raveled edges here. So, in retrospect, it would have been better to piece this first, then rough cut the wedge, and then do the edges. But here we are. So, you learn from my mistakes, right? So I'm going to do this, and I don't think I want this. Do I want the strip to be that wide? Oops, take off the 1/4 inch for the seams roughly. That's wider than I want. I want it to be pretty narrow. So if I do half and take a 1/4 inch off here, this is 3/4, that will give me a 1/4 inch strip. It's pretty narrow, but that's what I'm going to go with. And if I do that, then I've got 2 strips for the price of 1. The other thing about rough cutting it, inserting this before I rough cut the wedge, is that then when I even these up, I'll still be in good shape. If I don't get it quite even here, when I match this up again, these edges don't come out right. So I'm just going to have to make those edges come out right. And then maybe another one down here. We'll see once we get this sewed on. This is pretty good. It's not perfect because if you've watched previous videos, you know, if you want to keep the same angles and portions here, that your inserted strip has to be cut 1 inch wide to make up for the seams that are coming out of it. Mine was just 3/4 of an inch wide, so it's a little bit off here, but I have just enough of that fusible web that I can even this up. This side's pretty good, but this side I'm going to have to do a little bit of trimming. So this would be another good reason to do the insert first and then cut. So I'm going to trim this up. And looks like maybe that didn't get trimmed quite right. So honestly, this is the reason why I do a lot of this hands-on instead of trying to think it through in my brain, because I may think it through correctly and all of the factors are taken into account, or it could be that I just mess up, leave something out, and then I am in trouble. So that's why I do this. I think I'm going to leave this at just 1 stripe because I have been able to make up for, you know, to recover from having this not match up correctly. But if I put on another one, then I'm shaving a little bit more off. So I think I'm going to leave it at just this one. And that pretty much tells me what I wanted to learn and to know for this particular riff on what I was doing. Now I'm going to cut another one roughly here. Well, actually a couple more roughly here. And they probably won't all have strips inserted, but there will be some. And I'm getting some more pieces for my crumb box here. So now when I am doing this, I want to have some of them be longer still, and some of them shorter, but I don't want them to meet down here. So these I'll just rough cut, because I've learned that's the better way to start this anyway, so that is what we are doing. I'm checking myself this week to make sure I have the record button on when I think I have it on. I'm consistent in failing on that one. All right, more crumb. I feel like Julia Child here, tossing things on the floor, or Eleanor Burns, no relation. All right, now this is not the piece I'm going to put this on. Excuse me. But I wanted you to kind of see how I want to do this next one, so that it is uneven down here at the bottom. Definitely don't want that happening though. I don't want those to match up. Excuse me, maybe not that extreme at the bottom, and maybe I will even angle these at different angles. So that's my plan for these. Now, another thing that I could do with this insertion bit is, of course, to do curves. So I could put some of this fabric, a wider strip than this, underneath and cut a curve, a pretty gentle curve. Can't get, if I try to put too much curve in here, then it's going to be harder to sew, because it's a strong curve in a short area. So I would probably do a pretty gentle curve, or do a bias strip and then do some snakier curves around there. So I wonder if I have something that would at least mimic a bias strip. Okay, this isn't a bias strip, but it's narrow enough I can sort of bend it to my will to an extent. And then I could do a curve. I could do something longer if I wanted to do more curve. I could angle it more sharply down the blade. And I think that could be kind of fun. I could also, if I'm doing that, have the option of maybe snaking it across a couple of the blades. Not sure how I feel about that, but it's an option. And I think I probably would also do some different sizes of black and white stripes, and maybe even different black and white prints. So I have, for example, my favorite wide stripe. Just cut a strip here. I really have to buy more of that while it's still available. I can remember where I got it. So let's do a narrow strip of this. Pardon my allergy voice today. So having a little variety in the stripe would be cool, I think. Sorry, I went off camera to cut some of those roots, hair roots off there. And I sort of, as I was coming back, thought, I think I kind of like that bias coming off onto the background a bit, so that it's not a part of the blade, it's on top of the blade. So that is definitely a possibility. And that's the sort of thing that I'm looking at for the next blade in the series, the next Dresden in the series. Really would be better if that was a true bias. So I think that's all I'm going to play with on camera. You see where I'm going with it and how I got to my conclusions here, which was the main point of this part of the exercise today. And I guess for those who weren't here last week, then I will use stitches to, some decorative stitches from my machine to applique these down. Remembering that I found some of them were overlapping. They didn't all have spaces. This one may have, I think it may all have spaces, just different widths. I have to be careful though, if I do just a narrow space here, if I'm doing a decorative stitch that is centered on this line, on the edge, and then I have a decorative stitch that extends out here, and then a decorative stitch that extends out there, they're going to overlap. So I either have to choose one that's going to be right up against this edge with nothing overlapping, make this wider, or do just an invisible stitch, invisible thread, so that you don't really see it. What I discovered, for what I liked anyway, is that I didn't like to have the decorative stitch on every single edge. It wasn't the look that I wanted. Well, I had originally had a decorative stitch over here too, and it just was too much of that. I thought it drew attention away from the colors and the design and put it more on the stitches, and that wasn't what I was looking for. So then I did, every so often I just did a zigzag with invisible thread, and I like that much better because that is more eye-catching this way, but it doesn't capture the eye completely so that it doesn't see anything else. It's just a little more texture and visual interest. For my next trick, I want to do curved blades. I'm watching I have a little netted sort of greenhouse thing over my tomatoes, and I'm having to watch because I came out a couple days ago and there was a cardinal in there flailing around. I have no idea how he got in there. No clue how he got in there, but he was certainly panicked. So I opened up unzipped one of the doors. He was too scared. I came back in the house. He was still too scared. So I went out and opened up the other door. So he finally flew out, and I'm still trying to figure out how he got in there. I mean, I was sure to secure things to the ground, and the net is I don't understand, but I think he learned his lesson. I haven't seen one in there since, but I'm still watching carefully. Sorry, sidetrack. Now, for this one, I had at first envisioned this where these, I don't know if it would have been these two, but two fabrics together, and then the two blades would curve on this edge together so that they would be right next to each other. And that may still be what I want to do, maybe, in some cases. If you remember on the other one, some of them were right up against each other and some of them had spaces between them. If I do it this way, then this is the only side that I need to have Fusible on because I want this to overlap just a little bit. And in that case, well, let me think about that. If I overlap it a little bit, then only this one on the top of the overlap needs to have the Fusible web on it to contain the thread, the ravels. I could have them right up against each other, which means that I would need Fusible web on both edges. In both cases, I think I would want to rough cut the curve first, then put a strip of Fusible web on each side of that curve. It's probably going to have to be wider because the curve is going to be curved. And the Fusible web, of course, is not on the bias. So Of course, I have the option of just fusible web on the back of everything and have that bulk. Then cut those simultaneously. There won't be double bulk under there because they'll butt up against each other, but then I'll still have the bulk here. And I just don't want that much bulk. This is probably not going to be this wide, mind you, but so the other option is to just have them all separated. And this, I could do pieced curves along one side. Then I end up here with this issue of turning under that seam allowance, and I'd still have to stitch that down somehow, unless I were piecing the background too, and it's just, I don't want to do that. So let me try doing a rough curve first. One is, because one is going to be longer than the other, I anticipate, then this one would need to be, the longer one needs to be on top. Yes, yes. Nope. All right, if I do this and cut that one there, then yes, this one needs to be on top. All right. Or I have that little funky corner there. All right, and I do want a reasonable, I mean, quite a good curve here. I'm going to be appliquing. You probably can't see it very well, but I can see the edge under here. So I'm going to give this a go. That's why we're here. And I want it ultimately to be wider up here. So that was pretty close. And I'm going to, for form's sake, put on my klutz glove. Just because I know some of you get nervous when I'm cutting freehand like this through more than one layer. All right. So there's a rough cut of the curve. Don't know how I'm going to feel about that particular curve, to be honest with you, because I want that to ultimately be wider up there. Can it be wider on both? Because if I come around the curve here, then my natural thing is to curve back that direction, which means this blade is going to be, yeah, it's going to be an issue, isn't it? All right, so here's what we're going to do. This one, I'm going to cut a curve I want here. And then this I still want to be wider up here than down there. I don't really necessarily want the curves to match up. And cut that off. And then this I want at an angle. That wasn't a very good angle. Still wasn't a very good angle, honestly, Karen. Must have allergy brain today. That's my excuse for the day anyway. I don't know what'll happen when I do this tomorrow. Okay, now this one, say it's going to go next to it, but we're not right next to it. I think what I was visualizing in my head isn't going to work as a Dresden kind of thing, because typically your Dresden is going to be narrower here and wider up there so that it arcs. But if I have these right up against each other, then one of them is naturally going to be narrower at the top. I could have them start out next to each other, but again, then when I have it this close down here, the applique stitches are going to be overlapping in a funky fashion there. So let's do this one. And maybe I'm trying to get in too much curve, or maybe not enough. Getting lots of crumb pieces here, aren't I? I could do one side curved and one side straight. Let me try that. Or do I want to try that? Well, I can kind of get an idea this way. If I just say do something like that. And if, say, this one then, so I could do flat on one side, curve the others. I don't mind that. So that I'd have a couple that are right next to each other, and together they have this widening curve. That would be all right. And then do another one that's separated from this, and maybe just do one on its own that's curved on both sides. All right, I'm going to go with that. So if I cut this roughly straight on the edge where I want it to be, so I do want it to be a wedge shape. Sorry, I know I'm muttering to myself, which means I'm going to have to adjust the audio when I edit. And now I have a little narrow one for something else sometime. All right, which edge do I like better here? Which curve? I think I like that one, so I'll straighten this one out a bit. And this one, I want the top to be angled. And more crumb pieces. I've got to do something with this crumb bin. And as I was looking for the black and white stripe, I realized that I also need to get Alice together. Alice Wondering needs to go together. Now, do I want these different down below? I think I do. And I think I want them angled. Maybe. Let me find that white again. A little better to see against than the green cutting mat. So I have a curve over here, a curve on that side. Then there will be a space, and I'll do another piece that is maybe curved on both sides on the other side. But first, let's see how we're going to deal with these two. This way, if they're not going to overlap, so if I've got these straight edges, then I don't have to worry about the overlap. So see, if I was going to overlap these, then I have this funky little notched seam there. But if I put the longer piece over it, then I'm going to end up with it down here. So I would have to even bring that down so it was longer. But since I'm going to overlap or butt them up against each other, then I don't have to worry about that, and I can do a single stitch like my favorite railroad stitch that's going to cover both of those seams, or both of those edges. Don't know yet what I would do up here. On the others, I did zigzag with invisible thread, and I suspect that might be what I would do again. So that is what I would do here. Pretty much the same process for getting the fusible web on the edges. Again, you always have the option, if you don't mind the bulk, of just doing that at the outset, just putting fusible web behind your strips and just cutting them all out and using the fusible web everywhere. Then you are sure you're going to have fusible web everywhere you need it. But let me do just one more that is a stripe or a curve on both sides and see how that looks when they are separated. So I have something, I may in fact be trying to put too much curve into it. Not sure about that. This is a pretty wide strip, but it gives me quite a bit of wiggle room for the curve. I'm going to try to do this to the side so you can see it on camera. Put my glove back on so none of you will be having a difficult time. This is narrower a little bit to begin with, so I'll start down here. Maybe I want the curves to match up. Let's see how that goes. Now they can't match up because, well, they could. It's just not going to be much of a wedge then, right? Can't have them parallel, which you all figured out a long time ago, I'm sure. Allergy brain, honestly. I could do it in sort of an opposition, so it's more like a vase shape, but I'm not sure I like that. So I might do it in sort of roughly the same, but not perfectly parallel. And bring it down like that. There, that's better. Oh, sorry people in Tornado Alley. This is beginning to look to me like a tornado, but sorry about that. It'll be that time of year when they can start up again. So I hope everyone remains safe in all the storms and the drought and the floods. I'm thinking about all of you in the weather crisis areas. Weather can be unrelenting and unmerciful. Okay, I like that shape. So roughly parallel, but still doing that kind of wedge shape. So I don't want to say funnel shape, but it's kind of what it is. All right, so then I need a bigger piece of white, don't I? So then I have these. Different lengths, I mean at the bottom at different places, and then this piece comes in. Oh yeah, that's going to be all right. I'll be good with that. Could have it go this way. Now of course if I had a one-sided, a right and wrong side fabric, then I couldn't do that, but since I'm using dyed solids, they can flip either way. And I think I would want one that is maybe just on its own, and then do maybe 3 over here, 3 together. So one in the middle would be basically straight, or overlapping another one that's curved. So say I did something like that with a group of 3, and there would be just that bit of overlap there, but that could also work. I might make one of these a little more acute angle. It's getting to be a pretty good size too. It kind of needs to go this way more, which I could do just by moving this over, of course. Sliding it more like that. And then it would arc more quickly. Then I would have to see, once I stitch these down, if I want something more. This is a pretty wide piece. I could either make it narrower, or I could do something to kind of break that up. So it might be a bias strip that curves. I don't think I want anything spliced in there, but I might want something curving up there. Maybe a black and white stripe, but also maybe, say, a little strip of green that goes up. It's definitely a possibility as well. Some of these pieces are getting a little wide, so it's going to be, I either need to cut them down a bit or make this a bigger piece. I'm not opposed to that. I was thinking, what if I were to find a way to put these pieces together? This will be 3 pieces that I do. I don't know. I am using the same fabrics that are left over from Pipe Dreams, so they will certainly coordinate that way. I'm almost thinking this is too big a piece. What do you think? I need to trim that down a bit yet. Honestly, I'm not sure I like this blue and gold right next to each other, for that matter. I think I might rather have a green one next to it. Lots of decisions to make in this improv thing, you know. Planned improv. Yeah, I do think I like the green next to that better. So I will probably do another slice. What if I do, that's a very short piece though. I think that's decidedly too short to go up against this one. Might be able to do it further on, but I think for this one I need a longer piece of green. And then this will happen over here somewhere, I think. That's where I'm going to leave it today, because sort of answered all the questions that I had about how this was going to work. So I will perhaps sit down later this week and work some of that out, cut a larger piece of white, get some of these pieces cut out and get the Fusible on them. And I'll just follow the same as I did with the others. So again, you don't need to sit and watch me do that. It turns out that I couldn't just go away without putting these on a larger piece of white. I was just being lazy, and you deserve better than that. So I went and got a pretty good size yardage piece of white. Pardon the funky edges. I didn't want to cut a piece off just for a background demo, so this is just folded up. But I think that, you know, I like white backgrounds, so I think this helps. And I do kind of like that going off the edge, at least for the piece on the end. I don't know that I would want to, say, put another piece on there. Maybe with it going over that piece too. I don't like that as well. So I think this would end up being something, the piece on either end. I don't know that I would like it on both. Oh, here's an idea. It could be kind of a woven piece where it goes over and under and over and under, so that it would, excuse me, say come under there. Oh, then it would have to go over that one. I don't know, it's a possibility. I'd have to get a longer strip and try doing that. But I do like that curved. Once I actually cut a bias strip, and then I can curve that however I like, so it could be sort of a tie at the end. It could be like a Dresden basket where that weaves in and out. Anyway, that's the first one that we talked about, and here I cut this edge, or this piece, a little narrower, and then I cut a green. Whoops, that's not going to work, is it? I know, you all are just having a heyday at the other end going, no, Karen, stop being dumb about this. Okay, then that piece there. And then say this piece here. And then this piece could be over here with, trying to get this spaced out well enough, but still be on in frame for you all. And then have another piece over here, maybe one about this color, but curved, and just continue on that way. Oops, pardon the shake. I think I like that, a little bit of a curve, but not too much. And then more curves coming out here, I think will. I'm still not sure this isn't too wide. It's a little overpowering, especially in that deep color. So that may have to be trimmed a little bit anyway. So that's where I am so far on the curve. And hopefully I will get a chance in the not too distant future to do some work on that. Thank you again for joining me today. Please like and subscribe, and let anyone who has an interest in this kind of thinking out loud, working out design, and logistical construction issues, please ask them to check us out, stop by and see if they might be interested in what we're doing. I will see you next week. In the meantime, I hope all of you are safe and well. I know there are lots of extreme weather things going on in the world, and I'm especially thinking about those of you in serious drought and in Dallas in the US where there's flooding going on. Please stay safe. I will see you next week when I will maybe work on more of this as we get into September, October. I do have something else I want to show you that's sort of based on one of my patterns. In the meantime, until next week, be well, be safe, be happy, be quilting. Peace out.